Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you all for joining us today in this webinar titled Vietnam's Strategy, Power Rivalry, China's Diplomacy, and Economic Relations. This event is brought to us by the University of the Philippines Asian Center in partnership with the UP Department of Political Science. I am Edsel, an assistant professor at the UP Department of Political Science, and I will be hosting today's webinar. Today, we are joined by distinguished speakers from our neighbors in Vietnam. Each speaker will have around 12 minutes to be followed by a reaction from a Filipino scholar, and then an open forum toward the end. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, please feel free to type them in the Q&A window, and we'll try to address them during the open forum later. So to formally open our program, may I invite Dr. Tina Clemente. Dr. Tina Clemente is professor at the Asian Center, University of the Philippines, Diliman. She earned her PhD at the School of Economics, also from UP Diliman. Her research interests include China studies in the Philippines, Philippines-China economic relations, economic history, and development. She was the program convener of the 2016 China Strategic Studies program of the UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies. Dr. Clemente is the former president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies and the first editor-in-chief of the Chinese Studies Journal. In 2022, Dr. Clemente received the 2022 Gawad Chancellor sa Natatanging Guro, the most prestigious award for UP Diliman faculty that recognizes excellence in teaching, research, and service. Please let us welcome Dr. Tina Clemente.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Edsel. I am most pleased to welcome you all to this timely event. And as we have several talks lined up today, and I am sure we are all excited to head into the presentations and leading discussion, I will keep my remarks extra brief. On behalf of the UP Asian Center and the UP Department of Political Science, this webinar is organized drawing on academic and policy interests in strategic relations and development. For enthusiasts of China studies, Southeast Asian studies, Philippine studies, and international affairs, this event allows us to examine Vietnam's approaches to geopolitics and relations with China while reflecting on Philippine and regional context, appreciating issues by starting with national interest. While a country's external relations and how these play out in regional dynamics often generate great attention, strategic consideration on multiple fronts is necessary in aid of veering away from the practice of reactive policies. This morning, we invited colleagues from Vietnam to deliver relevant talks on the delicate navigation amid power rivalry, diplomacy, and economic relations. I hope this event encourages us to adopt a constructive spirit in engaging the myriad interests represented here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, Dr. Tina Clemente. I know this topic generates a lot of interest, so without further ado, let's get on with the presentations from our distinguished speakers who are all joining us from Vietnam. We will start with Dr. Do Tan Hai. Dr. Do Tan Hai holds a doctoral degree in political science, international relations, and strategic studies from the Australian National University, where he was also given the Prime Minister's Australian Endeavour Award. His book, Vietnam and the South China Sea, Politics, Security, and Legality, was published in 2017. Currently, Dr. Hai is a senior fellow and serves as the Deputy Director General of the East Sea Institute, Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. He also served as the Minister Counselor and Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Vietnam in India in 2020 to 2023. To start us off with his presentation titled Vietnam, Navigating Between Great Powers, please welcome Dr. Do Tan Hai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Magandang umaga. Xin chào and very good morning from Hanoi. Dear Professor Tina Clemente, fellow colleagues and students. Actually, it's an immense privilege and pleasure for me to be invited by the organizers, the Asia Centers and Department of Political Science of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, to speak about the Vietnamese foreign policy, a topic that is very important for us to share with each other and to be neighbors. I think that is it good that we have a chance to talk to each other, to share our experience and also understand about each other. And on this, I would like to comment on the effort of Professor Tina Clemente to bring us together. This event is very important in a way for us to know each other and to share our experience and how we deal with the very fast changing international situation and security environment recently. Before I go into the main topic, I would like to share with you two anecdotes. You know that Vietnam is a country with a very strong fighting spirit. And of course, in the course of history, we fought with many powers. Over the last 200 years, we fought with France, Americans, also the Chinese. And of course, many Vietnamese people will be proud of that history. And the first anecdote when our leader meet the Thai king, and of course we tell the Thai king that Vietnam is a very powerful nation because we fought and we won over many big powers of the day, including the U.S., France, and China. And the Thai king just smiled and replied that Thailand also very proud that it has not in fighting with any big powers. The answer would be somehow staggering us because we know that before that we thought that the strategy of the small country is always be invaded by big power. And we know that there's a case that the country still can preserve peace without resort to fighting against them. And the second anecdote is that after we Vietnam reunified its country in 1975, and also our leader at that time believed that because we won over the biggest military apparatus in the world, and we thought that we can rebuild Vietnam very quickly into strong and prosperous country. Just within, they also believed that within the 20 years, we could make Vietnam can be stronger than even the US. But just 10 years later, the political elites in Vietnam understand it's very difficult to build the country economically and make it become a viable economy that can support the welfare of the people. So from there, I think that the thinking and the mentality about the Vietnamese foreign affairs had changed. And of course, we changing from the revolutionary movement in 1945 till a sovereign nation. And of course, we believe that the defense and security is the ultimate goal for the nation. But then one day we realized that without a stronger economy and also expanded international relation, we cannot fulfill that goals. So in the late 1980s, there was strong rethinking on the Vietnam foreign policy, especially the objectives of the nation. And we realized that Vietnam need be not only the defense of the country sovereignty and territorial integrity, but also we need the stronger economy, and also we need friends. So by the late 1980s, our late Deputy Prime Minister Winkeltech also proposed a formula for us to achieve that goal, that we need maybe just enough defense, we need the stronger economy, and the third element is expanded international relations so that we could achieve, that goals. Now, also that we have to note that the Vietnam foreign policy has been shaped by its geography, its history, and also its vision. Of course, I already told you about the vision and the thinking behind that. Of course, in terms of geography, Vietnam elongated shape and the long coastline make it very vulnerable for the external intervention. And one way or another, that in the history, we have been invaded about 13 times, and most of them come from the sea. So the sea become a very vulnerable areas for Vietnam that we need to strengthen its defense and security. And also throughout the course of history, we learned that when we start have the idea how to deal with the big powers, and it become very important part of the country foreign affairs. And we always believe that big powers have a special role and important for the country in the way that they will have the power and have in the influence and have the capability to shape not only the regional security environment, but also the national and security environment of any country. But we also realize there's a dangers in engaging with the big powers. Two dangers for by and large. The first one is to be alone or to be vulnerable in front of predating power. And you know that the history show us that we should have been always cautious and worried about the possibility of being intervened by foreign powers. But we also realize the second dangers, if you get too close to one power, that would uh, that would uh, that would trigger the concerns of other power, or in other words, the dangers get entangled into great power rivalry. So from that, we try to develop our foreign policy in the way that we could maximize the opportunities and chances brought about by the great powers, but at the same time, we try to minimize that type of dangers. So our foreign policy in the post-Cold War period is shaped by a couple of elements, but most importantly, we try to make peace with all the neighbors and big powers. And the second one, we believe that the fewer enemies, more friends are important, so that we could work on the diversification of our foreign policy and of our partnership. And the third one, if you are weak, so you're always vulnerable to the external circumstances. So you need the stronger economy, and also you need a resilient economy so that we could weather all the external shock. So from that, I mean, for the first element, the making peace, Vietnam have been make a lot of effort to negotiate with the neighbors to resolve the existing border and maritime disputes. Of course, we managed to settle the dispute in land border with China's maritime delimitation with China's in the Gulf of Tonkin. We also signed the maritime delimitation with Thailand in the Gulf of Thailand. And we also have a lot of cooperative activities with Malaysia in the overlapping zone in the of the southern coast of Vietnam. When we have the overlapping, and at the same time we still have some dispute, of course, in the South China Sea with neighboring country like China with Philippines and Malaysia. But we believe that the dialogue is the best channel so that we could resolve the disputes peacefully. Though of course there's a lot of uncertainties and a lot of tension recently, but so far we still keep on, keep down that path. And of course, we try to avoid the dangers of getting entangled in the big power rivalry, so that we try to maintain our strategic autonomy through the foreign policy, that is no alliance with other powers, no foreign soldiers in Vietnamese soil, foreign bases in Vietnamese soil, no go with one country against another. And the fourth no added recently that we would not resort to force in the first place. So basically, Vietnam tried to handle the big powers in the way that we don't want, that we want to create the image, to create the perception that we can go with one country against another's. And that is very important. And the second element that we try to build more friends. And of course, we have the motto that Vietnam want to be friends with all nations. Of course, it's not the cliche, but over the last 20 years, we make a lot of effort to establish diplomatic relations with more than 190 countries all over the world. At the same time, we try to deepen our relations with key partners and also neighbors. So far, we managed to create 7 comprehensive strategic partnership with both China's, Russia, India, and recently with US, Japan, now South Korea. And of course, there would be come up with some more Southeast Asian country down on the road. We very hope so. Of course, altogether, we also have another 11 strategic partnership with other country, and we have 10 comprehensive partnership. So with that network of partnership, comprehensive strategic partnership, and comprehensive partnership, we try to establish the communication with all powers, and we share the concerns, and also we also try to cooperate with them to resolve the existing problems and disputes, and at the same time to make our message clear that we work on our own security and defense. We won't go with one country and another. We won't resort to the use of force in the first case, first circumstance. So on that, I mean that the network of friends also have Vietnam's or not in the way that we would develop our stronger economy and build our own defense and security. And the third element is that we also have to make our economy strong, and we long believe that integration into the world economy is a best path to doing that. So we did a lot of efforts to be part of the ASEAN, the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, the APEC. We signed the bilateral trade with the American, our own foe. And later we put a lot of effort on crafting the CPTPP, the Comprehensive Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. And of course, we also be part of the ASEF, the RCEP. And of course, we recently also signed the free trade agreement with European Union. So we have now on the baskets about 16 or 17 free trade agreements that allows Vietnam to access the market of all major economies, and also that also have Vietnam to draw in a lot of foreign investment in the way that would help bolster the economy. Because in that network, we also believe that ASEAN is among the most important for Vietnam. Also, ASEAN also create a lot of disappointment in one way or another, especially in dealing with the the South China Sea dispute. But we believe that ASEAN is a long-term project, and ASEAN, without ASEAN, our Southeast Asian country would be in much difficult, much more difficult situation, because we have to deal with power alone on our own. But with ASEAN, of course, we have the community, we have the friends. Sometimes friends don't have to share your own opinions or your position, but anyway, that also have the stabilizing the situation, and it's an anchor for you, especially in that stormy circumstances. And the last element for Vietnam, of course, we also believe that the defense, just enough defense is necessary, because without some capabilities, you could not stand up in the situation when you're facing the danger and challenges from other country. So on the case that we try to build with minimal deterrence, in the way that we can have the power, can have the capability to project our power beyond our coast, especially with the submarine, Kilo class submarine. We have also some fleets of the modern aircraft. We have also the surface combatants, in the way that we could at least, to make our enemies very difficult and that are some formidable challenge that we will face if our interests is encroached. So that, I mean, is a multi-pronged foreign policy, in a way that try to build up our strategic autonomy, at the same time to cultivate our relationship with on big power, that help us to navigate all the tensions so far. And of course, I think that somehow that we can manage our relation with big power relations in a way that would help further Vietnamese interests. With that note, I would like to end my presentation here, and I would think that it would be a little bit more than the time given. So I'm very sorry for that, but looking forward to the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Xin chào, Dr. Hai. Dr. Hai shared with us the history of strategic thinking in Vietnam and how that strategic thinking has been implemented. Central to Vietnam's strategic thought is the importance of the sea, and of course, protecting the sea. I think it's an interest that, or an outlook that the Philippines also shares as a fellow country with a very long coastline as well. Vietnam recognizes the importance of managing great power relations, guided by the principles of peaceful dialogue and strategic autonomy. Vietnam also recognizes the importance of managing relations with fellow South China Sea claimants, fellow Southeast Asian countries, and middle powers through varying degrees of partnerships, not only on strategic matters, but also on economic affairs. Finally, Dr. Hai pointed out the importance of internal defense, not only for minimal deterrence, but also for upholding strategic autonomy from the great powers. Thank you very much, Dr. Hai, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Vu. Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Dr. Vu Cui Sun. Dr. Vu Cui Sun obtained his PhD from the Graduate Institute of East Asia Studies, National Cheng Chi University in Taiwan. His research interests focus on China's foreign policy, China's Belt and Road Initiative, the relations of China and Southeast Asian countries, as well as Vietnam-China relations. At present, he is a research fellow at the Institute of China Studies, Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences. To present on China's neighborhood diplomacy in Southeast Asia, the cases of Vietnam and Indonesia, please welcome Dr. Vu Cui Sun.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you, UPace Asia Center for having me, and so thank you for Tina for inviting me to join such a great webinar today. And today my presentation will focuses on the China's neighborhood diplomacies in Southeast Asia. As these cases, I want to pay much attention to in the case of Vietnam as Indonesia. As in my presentation, I try to provide a very detailed. It means that I want to share as approach to understand how China see others Southeast Asian countries in the East the overall the democracy as including the East neighborhoods the diplomacy as the my point of view today is mainly come from the joint statements, many joint statements of China and Vietnam, and thus China and Indonesia, because in the zone, normally when we're talking about China diplomacy and the China and the relations between China and others countries, including Southeast Asia country, we pay much attention to the where China puts Southeast Asia country in its overall diplomacy framework, or and puts Southeast Asia in its neighborhood diplomacy. So I try to answer that question because in the international relation we have as a given approach that when you see how a country see the other country, after that we can determine, or we can find out the way such the countries, China, and behave toward the others. So I put that frameworks in the case of Vietnam and in the case of Indonesia, and I try to find the similarities and the differences in how China positions its neighborhood country in its foreign policy towards the Southeast Asian nations, including Vietnam and Indonesia. As my arguments is that many similarity and difference demonstrate the predictability and consistencies in China's neighborhood diplomacy and China's flexibility, so that China can promote relations and cooperation with the different country, focusing in different areas and collaboration. And China's consistencies can show that in its relation with Southeast Asia country, China tend to promote a bilateral way to promote its relation with individuals, Southeast country, and I think that in the term of similarity, I think both China also see both Indonesia and Vietnam is a comprehensive strategic partner. As you know, Vietnam has been the comprehensive strategic partner of China since 2008, and Indonesia and China have built the relation as comprehensive strategic partner since 2013. and it's and both Vietnam and Indonesia's as seen as a priorities direction of China neighborhood diplomacy. For example, in the joint statement when Vietnam's Prime Minister Phạm Minh Chính pays officials visits to China in 2023. The China also stated to regard Vietnam as the priority direction of the Eastern neighborhood diplomacy, and and also in the case of Indonesia, when you check the several joint statements between China and Indonesia in 2013 and 2016 and 2018 and this year's 2044. We also can find that China also say that China considers Indonesia as the priority directions in China's neighborhood diplomacy. And the reason is Wang Yi in the meeting with the current president of Indonesia and the meeting with the nominee president and the person who will be the next president of Indonesia. Also, Wang Yi also stressed that Indonesia is the priority direction of China's neighborhood diplomacy, and that's also similar positions of Vietnam as that of the Indonesia in the China's neighborhood diplomacy. As the second part, I want to say what is the differences between the positions of Vietnam and that of Indonesia in the China's neighborhood diplomacy. And the case of Indonesia, because as you know, Indonesia is taking a leading role in the many reasons issue, and currently, I think it seems that Indonesia also proactively engaging into many global affairs. For example, Indonesia also saw successfully the meeting of G20s, so something like that. So I think that in many official statements, China's also tend to put Indonesia or sees Indonesia as a reliable partner in global affairs. And China also see Indonesia as a major developing country. As you know, for example, now Vietnam also is a developing country, but many this role it seems until now is not existing in the China-Vietnam relations. Expose some, for example, in some official statement, China have never say Vietnam is a major developing country, or China has never said Vietnam as a reliable partners in global affairs. I think that is the basic differences between the positions of Vietnam, position of Vietnam in the China's neighborhood diplomacy. And I think that it means that the role of Indonesia is taking in the relation with the China as much more than that of Vietnam in the Vietnam-China relation. So I think that both Vietnam and China, both Vietnam and Indonesia are very important to China to promoting economic cooperation. But sometimes because the difference, as you Dr. Hai also said about the geographic position of Vietnam, and I think that's that. So there are many issues. For example, security issue, and that's said. The position of Vietnam in the China neighborhood diplomacies have some limitation, and I think that's because the diverse role of Indonesia taking in the China's neighborhood diplomacies, that also shows us China's in scale of Indonesia, China can apply flexible is principle of diplomacy. For example, so five principle of peaceful coexistence, because China and Indonesia don't have much. Don't face much issue regarding sovereignties issue or security. So sometimes, as you know, the characteristics of China's principles of diplomacy have can separate into two types. One type is the realistic, and so the other type is idealistic. So I think that in the case of Indonesia, China can implies I can apply the much more ideals principle to promote the relation with Indonesia. But in the case of Vietnam, China tends to apply the realistic principle to promote the China and relations, China-Vietnam relations. And okay, that's my very short sharing, my point of views about the China's neighborhood diplomacies in South China Sea and the case of Vietnam and that of Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Son, for your presentation. Your presentation attempted to answer where is Southeast Asia in China's neighborhood diplomacy, and you used Vietnam and Indonesia as cases. Your finding is that contrary to what most Filipinos believe, perhaps, is that Indonesia seems to be the priority of China. And You argued that Indonesia seems to be the priority because Indonesia is taking a middle position on most sensitive issues, that Indonesia is active in global diplomacy and is seen as a reliable partner, and that Indonesia is a major developing country. But you highlighted that Vietnam is also seen as a reliable partner globally, and that China has also said that Vietnam is also a major developing country. No? But what makes Indonesia and Vietnam different is precisely that Indonesia takes more of a middle position on sensitive issues than Vietnam does, no? Which takes harder positions, I suppose, on the strategic issues that Dr. Dotan Hai mentioned earlier in his presentation. No? I think my takeaway from that is that China will make you a priority if you don't. But China will make you a priority, but you have to take a middle position on sensitive issues. Yeah. Meaning to say that if you take strong positions against China, expect that China will not reciprocate you in its neighborhood diplomacy. But we can talk more about that in the open forum later. No? Last but not the least is Dr. Hati Hong Van. Dr. Hati Hong Van obtained her doctorate in economics from the Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences in 2016. She's the head of the Department of Socio-Economic Research of China, Institute of Chinese Studies at the Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences. Her study interests include China's economic reforms and China-Vietnam economic relations. To share with us her thoughts on evaluating Vietnam-China economic relations, please welcome Dr. Hati Hong Van. Dr. Hong Van?
Okay, I'm sorry because the trouble of my computer, so it's a pity that I cannot hear the full presentation from Dr. Đỗ Thanh Hải. It's a very pity. And now my story a little bit different with two presenters before me. I mentioned about the Vietnam and China economic relation. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay.
Can you make it full screen now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay now?
Thank you. We can see it now.
Yeah. I have a little bit revised that. I'm now work for the Vietnam Institute of Economics. And now I'm promoted to the Deputy Director of the Vietnam Institute of Economics, Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences. First of all, I want to talk about the context before I present about the Vietnam and China economic relation. And economic relation here, I focus on the trade relations and FDI from China direct investment to Vietnam in 10 years from 2013 to 2023. But first about I would like to give a brief about the context that affects and have an impact to the Vietnam and China economic relations. First of all, I want to mention about global and regional factors. As you know, this period is after the global economic crisis. The world economy is seriously imbalanced. In many countries such as the US, EU, and Japan, the markets failure to the free economic model after 4 decades and have paved the way to forming a multipolar order with the rapid rise of emerging power, including China. Regionalism emerged on many continents as a way to compensate for the lack of connectivity between the nations. The Asia-Pacific region became the focus of many international economic links. Cooperation initiatives in East Asia, such as the ASEAN with China, Korea, and Japan became a typical regional cooperation model. New genre of FTA, economic institution as the AEC, CPTPP, RCEP, ASEAN-China Free Trade Area is effective. And as you know, recently the trade war between the United States and China, starting in the March of 2018, and it seems complicated and unpredictable. The trade war between the two countries had undergone the complicated process, from the outbreak to negotiation, renegotiation, and it had a great effect to the global and regional economy. And of course, it affects to the Vietnam and China economic relation. Not long ago, the COVID-19 outbreak, first it considered as a China shock, followed by the Asian regional shock, and then global shock. China is the world factory and the center of anti-global network, contributing to the world economic growth, accounting for 16% of the global economy. This epidemic that makes the China economic slowdown, with the production disruption and global supply chain operation have been disrupted. Therefore, the production disruption will increase secondary supply shock in the manufacturing and processing industry in a lot of countries. Vietnam is once the open economy in the world. We have a trade relation with 230 markets, and including FTA with 60 economies. Vietnam is pushing and participating more and more deeply in global economy. So that is also affect to the Vietnam and China relation, economic relation. As you know, China becomes the second largest economy in the world, with a population about 1.4 billion people. The middle class of population have been growing rapidly. After the 18th Communist Party Congress in China, the Chinese party and the government are looking for the new motivation from abroad, and they want to improve the quality, efficiency, and competitiveness of the economy. For example, they are accelerating opening up the border, enabling border to implement policy, inclusive model in economic cooperation, cross-border payment, infrastructure connection, as we know the Belt and Road Initiative. They build the IAB, and they promote R&D internationalization strategy. On the other hand, China has been increased its role to the global economy. They have the effort to build a new economic order. So the strategy created directly impact to Vietnam and China economic relation. And Vietnam now become a middle developing countries. We participated in 17 FTAs, and 3 FTAs are under negotiation. The FTA helped Vietnam reach to the top of 60 economies in the world, and we participate more deeply in the global value chain. We have the big FTA with the big partners. For example, EV CPTPP, RCEP. This is the table I calculate to illustrate the Vietnam and China trade relation from 2013 to 2033. In the green number here, you see the promotion of the bilateral trade between Vietnam and China increased among the total foreign trade of Vietnam. In 2023, the total bilateral trade between Vietnam and China account for 25%. You can see it's a very big number. From 2018, the total bilateral trade value between Vietnam and China surpassed 100 billion US dollars. You can see the red number here, and is increasing. For the For the 2023, it decreased a little bit because of global economic slowdown. So it affects to the Vietnam export in general, not only for the Chinese markets. And here, I want to show you the deficit of the Vietnam when we have a trade activity with China. The red bar here show the trade deficit between Vietnam and China. And you can see it's a big number. The biggest in 2022, we had a trade deficit with China is more than 60 billion US dollars. And here is the major trading partner of the Vietnam in 2023. You can see here we have Vietnam export to China in 2023, 60 billion US dollars. Is the second ranking after the USA. We have United States is the biggest importing of the Vietnam. 1960 billion US dollars, and AU in number 3. For the import, China is the biggest importing of the Vietnam. And of course, China is the biggest trading partner of Vietnam. And among ASEAN, Vietnam is the biggest trading of the China. And among the total, the biggest trading of the China, Vietnam ranking number 6. So you can see both China and Vietnam is the important trading partner of each other. About the structure of import routes, Vietnam import from China focus on the 2 large groups. The group 1 is the machine equipment and a component. And phone and component is the biggest portion of Vietnam import from China, accounting for 87.4% of the total Vietnam import in 2023. Group 2 is the input material for the industry and processing industry. Vietnam import a big amount of textile, leather, fiber, and another input that's support that needs for the processing industry, and it's very important for Vietnam export to the outside and into big market is USA and EU. Vietnam export to the China in three main groups. The first one is computer, electronic, and products and components. The second is fiber and old kind, textile, garment, goods, and products. Group 3 is agriculture products, vegetable, fruit, seafood, cassava, and so on. I want to mention about the group 3 because China is the biggest importing agricultural product from the Vietnam. For example, Vietnam agricultural products are mainly exported to China. Fruits and vegetable products export to China account for 53% among the Vietnam agricultural products export to the world. And especially durian account for 89%, lychee 90%, dragon fruits more than 80%, rubber 71%. And China is currently the third market of the Vietnam seafood export. In 2023, China import 24 billion US dollars vegetable and fruit from the world. And Thailand is the number one. And the second is Vietnam. The amount of export from Vietnam to China is 3.4 billion. Vietnam surpassed Chile, becomes the second largest import vegetable of the China. Here is a case of durian Vietnam export to China. In 2023, Vietnam export 2.2 billion durian, US dollar durian to China. It's a 5 times compared to 2022. It's because of China open more markets and give for the Vietnam more quota to export the durian to the China. And this picture shows that you can see hundreds trucks that carry out our vegetable is stuck in Lạng Sơn border gate during the COVID-19 period. So you can see how large the agricultural product that Vietnam export to China through the borderland. So whenever what happened from the China side, our products, our agricultural product is stuck in the border gates like this. Now I want to talk about the China direct investment in Vietnam. China stepped up its investment in the 90 decades and is now with a growing global strategy. But is it perilous? The China direct investment in Vietnam is not big. After the 18th National Congress of China in 2012, along with the promotion of the China Belt and Road Initiative, there have been a fundamental change in the strategy that China invests more to the Vietnam. Here is, I draw this figure so you can see the investment from China to Vietnam recently increased. In 2019 is very high. Before the COVID-19 outbreak happened, with the new project is about 683 new projects, and the new registered capital is nearly 3,500, 3.5 billion US dollars. And it slowed down because of China applied zero COVID in 3 years, 2020 and 2022. But in 2023, you can see its speed to invest to Vietnam is very fast and is higher compared with the 2019 with the 700 new projects and more than 3.5 billion of new registered capital. It's a stock figure in 2023 with the accumulation of valid projects to the time I check the data. You can see China in the position of the sixth with the total project about 4,000, more than 4,000 projects. And the total registered investment capital about 27 billion. But if we take a look, including Hong Kong, the big China is the investment in Vietnam is a big. For the 2023 alone, with the flow number, China ranking number 4. The number here is the corresponding with the figure that I showed you with before. About the characteristics. As we can see, over the past 5 years, China has always been one of the top 5 countries which had the largest investment in Vietnam. Chinese investors invested focus on processing and manufacturing sector with more than 2,000 projects. And the total capital is nearly 20 billion US dollars. In terms of location, Chinese business are present in 56 among 63 provinces and cities of Vietnam. Leading is the Tây Ninh, 89 projects. Tây Ninh is a border province between Vietnam and Cambodia. And you know, China invests in Cambodia a lot. So that's why Tây Ninh is one province that the China investment is high, a lot of projects there. Bắc Giang now it become a very prominent finger that attracts the investment from the China with 151 projects. Bắc Giang province is the middle. I mean about the far from the Hanoi to the border. So the Bắc Giang is the middle between Hanoi and the border province between Vietnam and China. So I think that's why it's one reason that the Chinese investors, they interest in Bắc Giang. Bình Thuận is a big project there. Bình Thuận is one of the center of Vietnam that develop the renewable energy. About the opportunity and advantage of the Vietnam and China economic relation. You know, because the Vietnam is located adjacent to the China, the land border between Vietnam and China is about more than 1,400 kilometers long. And in the Vietnam side, we have the 7 provinces in the border with the China. And in the China side, the Quảng Xi and Vietnam is located adjacent to the Vietnam. So that it creates the good condition for the transportation, the goods, the raw material, and production line between Vietnam and China. Now the China business recognize that Vietnam has a very special important position in supply chain between China and other countries, especially electronic products and textile. Vietnam has a high level of economic integration, which has motivated Chinese business to expand their presence in the Vietnam market. That I mentioned in when I start my presentation. China, the second largest population in the world, they has a huge potential consumer market of Vietnam export products, especially the agricultural products. In addition, the regular exchange between Vietnam and China, which create a favorable condition for the cooperation between business from the both sides. Good clearance activity at the Vietnam and China border contribute to be stable. In particular, Vietnam agricultural products tend to increase sharply in the market of billions of people in China. Regarding to the quality of investment capital from China, in the past, most projects was small scale with a medium and low technology, labor and energy intensive. And some projects cause the environmental pollution for the reason that some locality and somewhat hesitant when dealing with FDI projects from China. However, at the moment, the situation changing. Over past few decades, facing the opportunity of the technological revolution and digital transformation, China has emerged to become a country that strongly competes with the US and developed countries in many key future technology, such as high-speed rail, green energy development, AI, space technology, and so on. For that reason, attracting high-tech projects from China is an opportunity for Vietnam to improve the quality and efficiency of the attracting FDI, diversifying the investment capital sources, realizing the benefit and result in the international economic integration. Here is the case study that I have visited 2 years ago in Bắc Giang province. It is the Vinacell technology that from the Shanghai over China, they invest in is a project that China investor, they invested in the Bắc Giang province, produce solar battery. So you can see the technology is I think it's a high technology. So you can see the changing of technology invest project from China and in Vietnam now they're changing compared with the past. However, opportunity go with the challenges. We have been facing a lot of challenge in economic relation with China. Vietnam production interests are still heavily depend on the Chinese markets. As I mentioned before, we import a lot of input for our manufacturing to export to the EU or US and other developed countries. With competitiveness, especially in supporting industry, so that Vietnam depends on this market for both intermediate goods and final commercial goods. Importing machinery and equipment with a medium level of technology from China in the long term will make it difficult for Vietnam to increase the added value in production and the entire supply chain, while China aims to produce and provide high-tech goods and services. This increases the risk that Vietnam will fall deeper into the trap of outsourcing and assembly in the global production chain, as well as suffer from consequence of way of low-tech environmental investment from project from China. Vietnam now moves as a market benefiting from series of supply chain led by China because of China +1, US-China trade war, tension, and the post-COVID-19. You know, so some supply chain and big investment, they gradually leave the China and ship to Vietnam because Vietnam has a good location, very close to China. And as I show in the table of investment, South Korea now is the biggest invest into Vietnam at the moment. But this opportunity go with the challenge. Vietnam had a trade deficit with China, while we have a trade surplus with US and EU. We is at risk of become a temporary import and re-export market for China to avoid US sanctions on Chinese export. Since Vietnam export to the US are mainly computer, electronic product and component. Why Vietnam import a lot of computer, electronic product, component and machinery from the China? Our agriculture.
Dr. Ha?
Sorry,
Dr. Ha, can I ask you to wrap up your presentation, please?
Okay.
Thank you. You may summarize your presentation or go to your conclusion.
Oh, okay. I have only 2 slides more. Agricultural product is still cannot penetrate deeply into the Chinese market because we have not connected with the large proportion modern distribution channel in China. Our enterprise knowledge of the Chinese market is still limited. Now I go to the recommendation. So I prefer the strategy that our strategy is not how to compete with the China product. We have to redefine Vietnamese product with the China product. We are not compete with the Chinese product because as you know, Chinese product they have an advantage of a large scale of production, so not easy to compete with the Chinese product. For the import, we must strengthen the control of wood quality, and we have to tighten the regulation on the origin of import industry product from the China. For the FDI, we should attract the high-tech investment project from the China, and also we improving the business investment environment and create the convenience for the business investment in Vietnam. If I go to the conclusion, we know that China is seen to be a key market and very important of a trading partner of the Vietnam. So we have to find the solution to help us to more balance in trading with China, and in terms of investment from China, we should attack the high-tech investment from China. So that is my conclusion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ha, for your very informative presentation. Compared to Dr. Vu earlier, Dr. Ha is arguing that Vietnam-China economic relations must be understood within the context of unprecedented changes in the global economy, because of the pandemic, because of US-China trade war, and because of China's domestic policy as well, among others. So even though Vietnam is to adopt the language of in Dr. Vu's presentation earlier, even though Vietnam is lower in priority in China's neighborhood diplomacy, we see that China-Vietnamese economic relations remain very strong. In fact, China-Vietnam bilateral trade has been increasing, and Chinese investment to Vietnam has also, in general, increased, say from the blip during the pandemic. But that said, there are still challenges within Vietnam-China economic relations, and the big one, I think, that which Dr. Ha emphasized is the trade deficit. And for us Filipinos, I think this is the same challenge we face with our economic relations with China. We also import more than we export to China, and Dr. Ha also supported her presentation with some, I guess, surprising statistics for us Filipinos. No, most of us think that Vietnam-China economic relations are very robust. No, but some of the statistics that Dr. Ha showed are quite surprising. I thought. No, one of those is that the U.S. is now the biggest export destination for Vietnamese goods. No, and that the biggest investor in Vietnam is not China, but South Korea, Singapore, and Japan. No, I know that the presentations by our speakers, by all three of them, have given us a lot of food for thought. No, so to help us digest, so to speak, the knowledge that our speakers have so graciously imported to us. And help us guide the discussion later at the open forum, we have Dr. Aaron Jed Rabena. No, Dr. Rabena is a professorial lecturer at the Asian Center of the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Dr. Rabena obtained his PhD in International Relations from Shandong University in China. His research interests include strategic studies, Greater East Asian geopolitics and multilateral politics, political risk, and Chinese politics and foreign policy. To give us his reactions, please welcome Dr. Jed Rabena.
Thank you very much, Professor Edsel, and good morning to everyone. To our esteemed Vietnamese friends, Doctors Do, Vu, and Ha, Xin Chào. We are very honored by your presence this morning as you shed light on Vietnam's overall foreign policy strategy and your sophisticated China policy. I believe it's safe to say that in the Philippines, Vietnam has become a buzzword because, like the Philippines, who is a neighbor to China, Vietnam also has heated disputes with China in the South China Sea and has been able to adeptly combine cooperation and struggle with Beijing, or in other words, having a workable relationship with and push back against China. Early on, it was discussed that Vietnam was able to delimit its land border dispute with China and was able to come out with an arrangement in the Gulf of Tonkin. Notably, among ASEAN countries, it is Vietnam that has been very expressive in showing solidarity to the Philippines in the South China Sea. In fact, despite competing claims over the South China Sea, Vietnam has not denied the Philippines fishing access and resupply access, let alone water cannon Philippine vessels. There are structural differences between the Philippines and Vietnam, having different political systems. Obviously, with these different political systems, which it also means that there are different political values, different political cultures, and more broadly, different strategic cultures. At the same time, Vietnam is not a US ally and continues to resist suing China in an international court. Yet, there are circumstantial similarities between Hanoi and Manila. And it is for these reasons that Vietnam has been seen as a country in the Philippines as a country that it could draw lessons from. First, like I said, Vietnam is also a claimant in the South China Sea that had had its own bouts of tensions with China. From the skirmishes in the 1980s to the oil rig incident in 2014. We know that in the oil rig incident in 2014, China withdrew from unilaterally drilling for oil in the South China Sea against the backdrop of high-level party-to-party talks during the time. To many Filipinos, Vietnam takes great pride in its history, having been able to defeat great powers, as was mentioned by Dr. Do, from the French to the Americans to the Chinese. Second, many in the Philippines wonder how Vietnam stands up to China even without an ally or predilection for alliances. It is well known that Vietnam espouses a three-nose policy, which was mentioned by Dr. Do a while ago, which is no military alliances, no alignment with one country against another, and no use of Vietnam's territory for military purposes against another country. Third, despite political divergence with China, Vietnam seems to have been accustomed to the cycle of love-hate relationship with Beijing and continues to be economically interdependent with China. Perhaps this can be called selective or calibrated engagement, cautious engagement, or guarded optimism. And from my observations of Vietnam's foreign policy strategy, the following are very prominent. The desire for strategic autonomy through a conscious policy to hedge and diversify, and the need for deterrence. For example, we can see that both the US and China are strategic partners of Vietnam. Both the US and Chinese heads of state had visited Vietnam in Hanoi in the same year. Furthermore, Vietnam had signed on to the United States Trans-Pacific Partnership and China's Belt and Road Initiative. Vietnam also does military and maritime exercises with China, and last year it took part in the RIMPAC exercises in Hawaii. Vietnam also has the largest standing army in Southeast Asia and is the second largest military spender in ASEAN after Singapore. At the same time, we can see that Vietnam has been very keen on fortifying and arming to the teeth its occupied maritime features in the South China Sea. In view of these, it is clear that Vietnam's delicate balancing act is evident in terms of both optics and operational actions. Based on the presentation of Dr. Do, I think it can be related to the saying that one should not put all of one's eggs in one basket. Okay, and this basically allows Vietnam to accumulate as much benefits from multiple countries as possible and offset possible risks of overdependence and excessive alignment. The proliferation of strategic partnerships substantially serves Vietnam's interest to prop up its economy and its the party's domestic legitimacy. As we have seen in the presentation of Dr. Wu, China's neighborhood diplomacy, particularly towards Vietnam and Indonesia, have been reciprocated by Vietnam by treating China as a valued priority partner. Okay? And this leads us to the presentation of Dr. Ha, where she showed that Vietnam continues to have very extensive economic relations with China. But apart from that, Vietnam has a very extensive foreign economic policy, a foreign trade FTA strategy, value chain strategy, which really lives up to Vietnam's inclusive foreign policy efforts. And notably, economic interdependence continues to live on between Beijing and Hanoi, especially in trade, which means that Hanoi continues to see Beijing as a source of opportunity. Interestingly, like the Philippines, as Professor Edsel also said, China is our largest trade partner with whom we maintain a large trade deficit as well. And as per the presentation of Dr. Ha, Chinese investments too and Chinese projects in Vietnam continues to increase. And this is because of the favorable business conditions inherent in Vietnam. However, she says that challenges remain, and these include dependence on China, trade deficit, and among others. And so, based on the very able presentations and insights of our Vietnamese presenters, it is important for Filipinos, I think, to note that Vietnam's strategy does not just rely on negotiations or economic engagement with China, but also on the fusion of assertiveness and deterrence, which does not necessarily mean warmongering. Non-US allies like Vietnam and India, by being assertive, does not mean that they are warmongering. Vietnam's past experience of being invaded shows why it has strong regard for the need to modernize its military. The same should be true for the Philippines, who's had its own centuries of humiliation. So in parting, if there's enough time for discussions in the open forum, I wish to pose the following questions for our presenters. First, what advice could you give the Philippines in managing its own China challenge? Second, does China also pledge a lot of investments and deliver on its promises in Vietnam? And three, are there attempts to economically decouple from China, or is Vietnam worried that someday China might sanction it? And lastly, how do the Vietnamese public and media play a role in shaping Vietnamese state engagement with China? So I will stop here and thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jed Rabena, for helping us structure the open forum that we are now going into. No, so I think let's start with the questions that Dr. Rabena posed to our panelists. No, let's go with the first one. No, Dr. Do, Dr. Vu, and Dr. Ha, do you have any advice on how the Philippines can manage its own relations with China and the United States? No, in many fronts, no, security, diplomacy, and economic. Can we start with you, Dr. Do Tangkai?
Yes, thank you very much for the questions, Dr. Rabelda. I think that is because I'm not in the position to, because Vietnam is not in any position to, I mean, what is that, teach anyone or anything, because don't get me wrong, I mean, Vietnam also always feels it very difficulty and very confused. And when we deal with the big powers, there's a lot of discussions and a lot of debate and a lot of confusion as well. So not all the time that we have the consistencies, the united thinking, unitary on that. So I think that is all the matter of choice. But what we do believe that is important that we need to view it from the longer view. And the second one, that I mean, we need to build up ourselves in the way that we can be more resilient and more self-reliant in the way that it could give us more option. And I think that, but we are also aware that Vietnam and Philippines had a lot of different from each other. As Dr. Rivera mentioned that our political system are different. So that our maybe the set of values and the way of thinking, our history, our geography. So each country will, build on its own in the way that it could develop its own option. But it always that the idea that we should keep multiple option in the basket rather than we have to rely on one. So that is my first answer to the questions. With regarding to the investment, Chinese investment, we see the Chinese investment come in of the last couple of years. Before that, the Chinese in Vietnam are insignificant as compared to the investors such as Japan, South Korea, even Singapore or Taiwan. But more investment from China come of the last couple of years that I observed. But I think that is also part of the fallout of the trade war and also the rivalry among the great power. And on that, I think that that investment come and go, and of course we know that. But for the short term, so they are important, so that they generate jobs and also income for the people, and sometimes bring in know-hows and technologies as well. So trade investment is very important for Vietnam and also maybe for Philippines, others, because somehow that we are developing country and we need that for our national development. For the part of penalties, of course, we all know that if you are too much dependent on one country or one partner, so you are at risk of being sanctioned by one way or another at the time of critical situation. So we believe that that is a way that we need to diversify. We should not rely on one. And of course, but you could not do it over time. You have to have, again, a longer view on that. And with regarding to the public in Vietnam about how to dealing with China, so are the big power. We somehow that public opinion is always good. Somehow it's good side, but we also know that there are other negativities in the way that the public would not understand fully the challenge that the country face at hand. So on the one way that we make sure that the public understand, but we also that we have a very strategic thinking on that and how to deal with the problem. Because again, Vietnam and Philippines are two different political system in the way that we could handle. But of course, the idea is how to best protect the national interest and how best to pursue the long-term vision is important, and that makes a difference. That my thought on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Do. Dr. Vu Quaison, can I also ask you to weigh in on this? Any advice for the Philippines?
Okay, thank you, sir. First of all, I quite agree with the Thanh Hai sharing, and I just share my personal point of view as one point. I think the same as Vietnam, both Philippines and Vietnam are also the small countries in the region. So I think it's important for the small country to dealing with the great powers actions. I think there are two conditions. The first one is peaceful and stable external environment, and the second condition is the small countries should maintain the international law. And I think this is two conditions to let the small country to cope to dealing with the great power, for example, China or the US. And the others, the point I want to say that because as you mentioned also, Dr. Hai also mentioned that Vietnam and Philippines have different political system. But I think that we have a common issue. So we need to, both of us want to make ourselves stronger. We need to. So the way we need the way to making ours stronger. That's we need to develop ourselves, and I think the effective ways to develop ourselves is we need to we need to use our existing resources effectively. For example, we need to conduct effectively anti-corruption. The campaign of anti-corruption in Vietnam now have achieved many success. I think so. before we're talking about, we need to realize the external power. We need to solve our internal issue. I think this is a key point, is that we need to reserve both material and non-material resources, and we need to set the allocated mechanisms in a effective way to promote our risk, to promote and to use our resource in the best way. And I think that
Dr. Vu? I think Dr. Vu's connection has been interrupted. While we wait for him to reconnect, perhaps we can start with your thoughts, Dr. Ha. No, there are many questions by Dr. Rabena about Chinese economic investment, whether China has been pledging a lot to Vietnam, and is it delivering on these promises? No, are there attempts to decouple the Vietnamese economy from China as well? Can I ask you to weigh in on those, ma'am?
I quite to agree with the Dr. Đỗ Thanh Hải answer. He answered also, cover about my answer. So I only want to mention more and about the economic issue. That we know our depend on the markets, China markets, and now we have built a lot of measure and policy to try to diversify our markets. It means that we not own the edge in one bucket, We know about this. But the economics rule that it's cheap or it's convenient, it's easy to with the far markets with a lot of requirement, high standards and technical barrier. We know that. And now the deep reform that need to be worked on. We have no way to increase our internal economic power. For example, in terms of agricultural products and agricultural sector, we had to, our Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of Vietnam and our government, we have a lot of program and policy to encourage the farmer to use the modern technology, circulate agricultural products that make our product is more have higher quality, not much pesticide in our products, so we can export to the other product, our markets, for example, EU or Japan, beside the Chinese markets. It's about the agricultural product. And another issue with us in trading, and even in with the China investment in Vietnam. Now we should use the technical barrier to to narrow down the risk that we import too much, or the origin of the products of import, or the level of the project of the technology of the FDI project. Another issue that we should try to reform the economic institution to make the policy to more markets following the market rules, so that can make the can have the good environment of investment for the foreigner to invest in Vietnam. And another that, of course, we have to diversify the market. Yeah, that's it. I also answer the question that I think is before in the Q&A section for someone. I forget the name. Okay, that's my answer.
Thank you so much for your answers. Unfortunately, we're still waiting for Dr. Vu Koison to join us again, but let's go ahead with the rest of the open
He's here
forum while
already,
we wait.
Edsel.
Ah, Dr. Dr. Vu. All right. Let me summarize some of the questions that we have on the Q&A. No? Yes. Well, I think some of the questions have been answered already, but one question that keeps on recurring in the Q&A box is the Vietnam's position on the Philippines South China Sea policy, as well as Malaysia's South China Sea policy right now, no, under Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Do you have any thoughts on this, Dr. Dotang Thai? Vietnamese position on the South China Sea policies of the Philippines and Vietnam right now. Dr. Do, we cannot hear you. Dr. Do.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you now.
So, am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So for the South China Sea dispute, I think it's very important to note that Vietnam, Philippines, and Malaysia, we all part of ASEAN. So it is recognized that there's overlapping claims in the South China Sea, overlapping claim over the sovereignty in the straddling, and also in the maritime claims as well, generated under UNCLOS 1982. And the three countries also locked some submission to the United Nations Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. By that, they clarify their claims. So I think that from the standpoint of Vietnam, we recognize that, and we already pledged that we will work with Philippines, Malaysia, also other claimants to resolve the dispute peacefully. And of course, pending the lasting and final solution to the dispute, Vietnam also willing to cooperate with other claimants and other coastal country to maintain the peace and stability, and also to conduct the functional cooperation for the sake protecting the environment, the better interest of the community. And on the part, I see that there's a lot of engagement between Philippines and Vietnam, especially the last visit of His Excellency President, Filipino President Ferdinand Marcos in Vietnam is extremely fruitful and positive. And I also see that Philippines and Vietnamese forces in the struggling, they even play volleyball with each other. There are a lot of sport exchange. So I think that we have this view, but we have no problem with that. We work on that, and of course, at the same time, we maintain the amicable relations. And of course, also in the same time with Malaysia. So we have good cooperation with Malaysia, with the joint mission, and also in constant talk with them on the possibility that we would work with the Philippines and also other as well. Now, on that, I mean, the policy in each country is part of their own domain, and of course, we will not interfere with that. But from the Vietnamese standpoint of view, we stand ready to work with ASEAN partners, especially Philippines and Malaysia, to work out the solution that would be fair and equitable and under international law, especially because that would be best serve the region.
Thank you, Dr. Do. Dr. Vu, would you also like to weigh in on this question?
I think that
On
yeah, you have to turn on your microphone, Professor Abra.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Hai sharing is also over what I want to say. But I think it's previous questions as
I'm not sure
I
that my
also
answer
answered
is
that.
satisfactory. But it's my response to that.
Okay. Right. I think that in South China Sea, both Vietnam and Philippines also need the maintain the stable and peaceful in South China Sea. And so Vietnam welcomes all of the initiative or concept to contribute to the maintain such the conditions. I think this is the first one I want to address. And so the second point is regarding the COC. In spite of until now, so we had both Philippines and the others Asian country and China also achieved some progress in the COC negotiation, but among us also exist many problem. But I think we need to consider COC in the way of the way of negotiate, the way of communicate with China. I think it's very important because both Vietnam and Philippines also needs to maintain the communist channel with China. And I think it's Malaysia as well. I think it's also nice. So I think and by doing so, I think in the at present, I think by doing so we can contribute to the ministers stability and peace in South China Sea. And so that's my point of view. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vu Quoy Son. Perhaps the last question, because we don't have enough time. This is for Dr. Ha. There is a question about in the Philippines right now. No, illegal gambling is a huge issue. Illegal gambling funded by private Chinese investment is a huge issue. Do you also have a similar experience in Vietnam with illegal gambling?
Yep.
Dr. Ha?
Okay, I answer in the text message, but
Oh.
actually I don't have the official data for this. So I will try to find this, because finding the illegal gambling is not easy. I know in Vietnam now it's happened a lot of illegal gambling through the internet, but we cannot find which one is belong to China or which one is belong to the Vietnamese side. So I will try to find the data before I answer correctly.
Thank you so much for that. No, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to answer any more questions. But let me summarize what has been talked about so far in our open forum. No, Dr. Jed Rabena started the open forum with the question on what could be an advice for the Philippines from our distinguished speakers. No, and let me summarize their advice in 3 points. No. The first one is for us, the Philippines, to have multiple options like Vietnam and to embrace diversification, not only in terms of our strategic partners, but also our economic partners. No? The second advice perhaps is for the Philippines to think long-term, and guided by the principles of economic development and of course the national interest. And finally, the third advice perhaps is for the Philippines to prioritize domestic stability. This is domestic stability in terms of political, in terms of politics and economics as well. Politics, it was mentioned that anti-corruption campaigns must be done vigorously. We face this. The corruption is also a huge issue in the Philippines, and it is something that perhaps we should be doing more seriously as well. No? And economic, we should continue to engage in economic reforms, no, and in strengthening our economic institutions. No? So those are the three advices I could pick up from the open forum that we had right now. On the South China Sea issue in particular, no, our speakers assured us that Vietnam is ready to work with us and Malaysia, and as well as other stakeholders, to resolve the South China Sea issue in accordance with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and promote functional cooperation, especially on the marine environment. No? It was the importance of bilateral dialogue was highlighted, while multilateral talks at the ASEAN-China level are ongoing for a code of conduct on the South China Sea. So those are very helpful insights for us Filipinos, no, and I think our audience appreciates very much those ideas from our speakers. To formally close our program, may I invite Professor Herman Joseph Kraft. Herman Joseph Kraft is a professor at the Department of Political Science, University of the Philippines, Diliman. He is concurrently a convener of the Strategic Studies Program of the Center for Integrative and Development Studies at UP Diliman. No, he has been working on and has published articles and book chapters on international relations and international security, especially issues concerning ASEAN regional security in Southeast Asia, security sector reform, and intrastate conflict in the Philippines. Let us welcome Professor Herman Joseph Kraft. Sir?
Thank you, Edsel. And actually, my thanks to everyone. This has been a very important webinar, and I think you can see that in terms of the comments that we see in the chat box. But one of the things that we actually have to take into consideration is what Dr. Do was actually saying at the very start, that there is much to learn from each other. And this webinar helps us to take steps towards greater understanding of our different positions, and of our different thinking about different issues. But more importantly, it allows us to learn from each other's experience in how to address what are effectively common concerns regarding regional security and economic development. As has been repeatedly noted by our speakers, the need to balance between engaging with the great powers as friends and at the same time asserting our own interests against theirs is a key element in how countries in the region need to calculate their foreign policy approaches. And to that extent, the emphasis that was actually that came out of the discussions, is the need for us to cooperate, to collaborate, to consult, is something that actually comes out. In this context, the significance of this webinar is not limited to learning about Vietnam's strategic vision and how it chooses to pursue that vision. This webinar effectively actually tells us the value of learning more about our neighbors in general in the region. I hope that this is just the start of a series of webinars on our ASEAN neighbors, their strategic vision, especially for the region, the approach that they have taken, and eventually how this impacts our own approach to the region and our strategic environment. Our thanks therefore go to our speakers, Dr. Do Tan Hai, Dr. Vu Kison, and Dr. Ha Thi Hong Van. We also thank the organizers, the Asian Center, particularly Dr. Tina Clemente, and the Department of Political Science, for giving us a platform to increase our knowledge about Vietnam and hopefully our other neighbors in the future, and its approach to its foreign relations. But we also thank our participants for your thoughtful questions and the engaged discussion that this actually generated. And with that, we look forward to seeing you all in future webinars.
Thank you so much for your message, Professor Kraft. Let us thank again our distinguished speakers, Dr. Do Tan Hai, Dr. Vu Quaison, and Dr. Ha Thi Hong Van. Xin come on. And thank you very much for joining us and sharing with us your expertise today. With that, we formally close today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today in this webinar titled Vietnam's Strategy, Power Rivalry, China's Diplomacy and Economic Relations. Again, this was brought to you by the University of the Philippines Asian Center in partnership with the UP Department of Political Science.